Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast, where we explore health, wellness, performance, and try to improve not only your quantity of life, but your quality of life. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman.
Hi, everyone. Today we're joined by Dr. Darren Barnes. He is an athlete, a athletic trainer. He's done some teaching, and I worked with him. We had some overlapping time over at Linwood, and was kind of able to get exposed to some of his methods and the fact that he is kind of like pushing his education and gathering new training, and probably going to have some great insight for us in that area. But Darren, if you don't mind kind of telling us, I have a hard time remembering. I don't know if it was like 2010, but maybe like I remember seeing you and your brother coming into the college weight room. Maybe tell us a little bit about like your background and where you come from athletically and kind of how you got into this space a little bit.
Definitely. And I really appreciate being here. I'm excited to talk to you about my history in the sport and then also my career. So, as far as weightlifting, it started at an early age, actually. We started at 7 years old. So, and that started because of our oldest brother, Derek Johnson, who pioneered weightlifting for us, really. It was already a sport, but he got so great at it and he sacrificed his own athletic career to teach us weightlifting as well. So he did them both for a long time. So at 7 years old is when we started. He began coaching us at about 10, 12 years old, around that area. And then when he got to the job at Lindenwood University, where he started the weightlifting program, we were there training as well with him and just helping develop that program as well. Being a good environment, helping build that environment.
Yeah,
So it's been a long time. It's been a very 23 years still going.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. So I remember seeing you and your brother and coming in and kind of noticed like younger, smaller guys, and then see how much weight you're lifting. I'm like, kind of like scratching my head, like, what is
Yeah.
going on over there? So it was definitely pretty cool to see some of that stuff in person. And I had no idea that you started quite that early. That's pretty amazing.
It,
Um,
it's so funny that you mentioned those times at Lindenwood because it's honestly a little bit of a time that I forgot about. We did quite a bit of things while at Lindenwood. Honestly, I think, or at least before we got to Lindenwood, when we were about 16, 17 years old, training there with my brother. So there was a time we actually got featured in Sports Illustrated,
yeah,
us
I
two,
believe.
my twin and I.
Yeah.
And then when we were at Lindenwood, we there was a film that we did for Nickelodeon. I don't know if you remember a bunch of lights, cameras, actions in there, but that was
Okay.
actually for Nickelodeon.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
sweet.
you're bringing back some memories.
Yeah, that's what's up. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, 7 years old. Okay. There's not a whole lot of time before that, but I guess I'm just curious. Did you guys do other sports prior to that? Did you do other sports as like 7 to 12 year olds, or was that just like you, that's the thing?
We jumped right into weightlifting. We, of course, had other hobbies. So just like any kid, there's the thing that you're really good at, and there's things that you're good at as well that you don't dedicate as much time into. So that to us was the circus. So we had Circus Flora come teach us everything basically at Live for Life Gym as a
Yeah.
like that extracurricular thing that we did. So that's when we learned tumbling and stunts and all these things. So that was kind of something that we did as a reward after training. So we would train and then we would go straight to have fun with the circus, things like that. We did tennis camps as well. Again, all these were just to say thank you for being so good. Thank you for everything you do on the team. Here's a reward. It was great. We didn't see it as something extra at the time. We saw it as this is fun. This is athletic. We love these things. I didn't really get into any other sports besides weightlifting because at an early age, again, we became so good. We got
Yeah.
good really, really early. So, and I remember starting to break records and getting close to it at the age of 12.
Yeah.
And that's like before we even know the politics of the sport, so weightlifting was definitely it for us at an early age.
Yeah. Amazing. I got,
Hmm.
man, the pressure's on. My daughter turns 6 in a couple of days here, so I have to decide her athletic future. I got one
Yeah.
more year, and then I have to pick. Yeah, funny. So, yeah, definitely notice you around as a young, pretty awesome lifter. Just kind of like never really having a conversation, but just kind of seeing you around. Or seeing your twin brother. Maybe it was him, and I thought it was you or something. But and then you do some education at Linwood, and then you do some work at Linwood. Can you kind of talk about your education path and your professional path as well?
So it's funny that you mentioned that. The very first time that I was enrolling into Lindenwood, I was actually a vocal performance major. So
Yeah,
my path for a long time, graduating high school, was opera and vocal performance and musical theater. That was my path then. So after deciding not to go to Lindenwood, I switched my major to nursing. And this was when I was in Jersey. I moved to Puerto Rico. I was in Colorado. I was OTC for a while. All this time, I was a nursing major. And then unfortunately, things didn't work out at the OTC that I really wanted to pursue my education. Obviously, you can imagine there is a full-time job.
yeah,
So I put my education first and I said, hey, I'm going to go back to Lindenwood. At Lindenwood, they didn't have the same nursing program. They didn't have the full BSN program. They just had RN to BSN, I believe. So I switched my major to athletic training, and that's when the magic happened. So, and that was back in 2014. And I stuck with it since. I always knew that I wanted to take it to a terminal degree, and that's exactly what I did. So after I graduated in 2018, I took some time to really get into the field, and that was getting experience, that was getting certifications. I love manual therapy. Manual therapy is the thing I do.
yeah.
Uh,
And I have a guess, but if somebody's listening and they don't know what that is, can you kind of like summarize?
Say it again.
Can you kind of summarize like what is manual therapy?
So manual therapy is anything that involves you working directly on or with the patient. So whether that's massage therapy, whether that's joint mobs, anything like that, that you're physically touching the patient, athlete, whoever, and providing some type of treatment that way, or through using tools, things like that. You guys have probably seen Graston tools, all these instrument assisted tools. Dry needling is personally my favorite. So all those things kind of go under the category of manual therapy. And
Okay.
so, like I said, that's my favorite thing to do. So I took some time to really get into the field, understand my practice, understand all that I'm doing as soon as possible because it's a lot of competition out there. So when I got to the point where kind of things were plateauing, I said to myself, I want to take it to the next level. I start researching whether that was PA at the time, whether that was PT at the time. I said, no, I want to stay in the field that I really have the passion for. And that's athletic training, of course. So I made the courageous decision and I applied to the doctorate athletic training program at the University of Idaho. I talked to my professor, Rusty Baker, before I interviewed into the program, and it was exactly what I was looking for: research, manual therapy, things to propel you to the next level as a clinician. At that point, I said, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I finished last year. So wow, that's crazy to say I finished last year. It's moving. I finished last year and that opened the door to so many other things, so many areas that I didn't think I would be looking into that or I didn't think would matter. So uh and again, that's manual therapy, that's pain management, that's all these things that go into healthcare in general. And you wouldn't really think has such a complicated look. You know, a lot of people say there's only one way to treat, or there's only two ways to treat, and there's some better ways and the best way. Now it's so much more colorful than that. It's not just black and white. And that all I learned in this experience of graduating and then deciding to go back to school. You know, those it gets really complicated.
Yeah. It's that going back to school moment is it can be a tough pill to swallow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
it all pays off, definitely, because now I'm in a position where I can teach these things. And that's the
Yeah.
most important to me, is making sure that everybody is they have the opportunity to become their better selves. They're better
Yeah.
clinicians, they're better practitioners. So that's the most rewarding part to me.
Yeah. And just a side note, I was having some IT band trouble once, and Darren put put his hands on me, and it hurt pretty bad. But you know what? It turned the tide on how that knee was feeling. And I don't think you're probably not selling yourself as like a one treatment wonder, but for me, you can have my testimony that you shifted the status of kind of what was going on with me. Um, so I'm a big believer in it.
Yeah.
Staying on that being, gosh, I mean, you had multiple other areas of interest. The opera thing I had no idea about. But that's probably there's got to be something good for like core stability with all that singing and all that stuff.
Breathing. Yeah.
The breathing. Um, there was that. There was the nursing, and then the AT path that you carried out for. So you did an undergrad. Did you do a master's before the doctorate?
No,
Okay.
so with this program, we were able to just jump straight in because we
Yeah.
had experience already. A
Oh,
lot of
sweet.
programs, you do need the master's.
Sweet. Nice. Okay. So
Mhm.
that terminal degree, that's a lot of schooling. And you're always, you talk not only just now, but also having spoken with you in the past, you're always looking for kind of that next thing. Um, do you have a next thing on the horizon right now, or what are you
I
thinking?
do. I do have a next thing. So now it's about making sure that all athletic trainers have an outlet to see the best. I'm always looking for the best. I blame my athletic career for that. So with dry needling being my favorite thing, I definitely want to expand on that. I don't want to say exactly what that is right now, but
Okay.
just know in the near future, you'll see Dr. Darren Barnes expanding in dry needling research and and an opportunity that's going to change the game for athletic trainers, PTs, acupuncturists, everyone as far as education. I'll just say
Excellent.
that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hey, I love it. All right. Very mysterious and intriguing, but I like it. Okay. Um, so you've spent 23 years or so trying to lift some heavy weights, and with that, you can gather some injuries, some nicks and dings. Um, if you had a time machine and you could go back and tell yourself to do things differently, or just kind of maybe your athletic training knowledge or your knowledge of being under the bar, what are some things you maybe would have done differently in the past, or maybe just some general tips that you have for lifters that might be listening?
So I would say stay on the same path that I was taking as far as recovery. I always preached being a smart athlete above a strong athlete, because you can be strong and make terrible decisions as far as taking care of your body. So the one thing that me and my brothers always preached was recovery. Whatever that looks like for you, it's different for everybody. But recovery for me was rest. Recovery for me was making sure that my body was as mobile as it could be. And recovery for me was pain management, because, it hurts. It hurts a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
So, but if I were to go back and say, hey, you need to really, really look further into this, that would be mobility. That would be mobility. I retired for about 4 years and completely took for granted what movement was. We move so well when we're in our elite phase that we don't know how well that is. We don't know how mobile we are. Hips, shoulders, ankles, all these things moving together to create one movement. To me, my favorite movement was the snatch. And when I came back out of retirement and I felt the difference, it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy how to look back and say, uh, this was the same person. I look at my older videos and I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that I did this. I can see what people say now as far as like, is he clean?
Yeah.
Definitely a clean athlete. But it's incredible the things that I was able to do with such mobility and things like that. That again, I would go back and say, make sure you stay that way, because when you lose it, or when it's becoming loss, it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be easy to get back into that elite phase. So definitely that. And then also just leave the leave the politics out of it, because it takes away from the fun. That's
Okay.
a very specific one, but if I had to really perform at a high level like that again, I would pay no attention to politics in the sport. None.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Good. So young Darren could have used some of that info, and hopefully this message finds the ears of some other young lifters and helps them out.
Yeah.
Um, it's always like I say, one of the most impressive things in sports is people who take a single year off. Like, now it's the conditioning, it's the reaction time, it's the I guess 4 years is definitely enough time to like stiffen up and lose some mobility and things like that. But yeah, that makes sense. That's 4 years is a lifetime of
It really
taking
is.
time off.
It's a cycle. It
Yeah.
literally an Olympic cycle. So
Yeah.
to have taken so long off without strict movement, without consistent movement, is almost like an athletic suicide.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need these muscles. I don't want these muscles. I don't want to feel them. Of course, what you don't use, you lose. So,
Yeah.
and that was the case, and associated injuries because of that. You're not, and then I took advantage, or I took for granted the the importance of co-contraction. Things like that people don't really think about. How are your quads firing, but your glutes are not? How what does this squat look like for you? Why are these extra movements happening? Things like that. Co-contraction, again, that's my current knowledge. Back then, I wasn't thinking about that because my body moved well, you know.
Yeah. 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 You're just doing it.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. And you said you're getting back into it and training's going good now. But you know what? I don't know if you've seen this or heard about this. I'm not the biggest, I don't really follow CrossFit. I'm very entertained by it. I'm very impressed by the elite CrossFitters. There's some of those athletes who are in the older age brackets. They weren't really into training hard their whole lives. They took some time off, and I think for a lot of them, it actually means that their bodies were like undamaged, and then they could get into shape. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I think the ideal thing is to just be in awesome shape your whole life and to be training hard and not getting hurt. Um, but now we have like this new population emerging where they're like, oh, I was like an engineer and I raised a family. And then I started working out when CrossFit got popular when I was like 55. And
Yeah.
now I'm 65 and I'm an elite games competitor. So I've heard some of those stories. I can't recall like a name or anything like that, but um, I don't know. Maybe those 4 years off might be the best thing that ever happened to you.
And I've said
So
that as well. I've said
yeah,
that as well as far as longevity. Could if I stayed active those 4 years, do I think I would have made it to 2028? Absolutely not. Because those injuries that I did have require a lot of attention. They require attention every single day. And it's something that I think about all the time, where what would actually happen if I kept consistently training during that time with two labral injuries, a healed rotator injury, and then some small injuries along the way from that time off. I think the best thing that I could have done was just take that break to heal, take that break to find my movement again. Because with injuries, not always, but come compensation. So looking back to see where those patterns were that I could have definitely done better to prevent injuries at that time, or now that I have taken that time off, it's the greatest opportunity to do that same thing. Let's focus on movement this time. Let's focus on moving well this time, and then take it all the way. Take it the whole 4 years without issues, because
Yeah.
now we know what to be prepared for.
Yeah. And now you were saying that recovery was like your family motto when it came to athletics, which is like maybe that might be the single lone reason why people know you guys' names a little bit and why you guys have done some pretty impressive things with a barbell. Um, and now you've reached that terminal. You're a doctor. You're basically a doctor in recovery, right? Like,
Yeah, actually,
um,
that's my favorite thing to do.
yeah.
Favorite thing to look at.
So now you have the training aspect to heap on all that training, but your ability to recover yourself has got to be way more advanced than it was, with your previous resources. So
Hmm.
um, I would think that would make up for some of the lost time and the lost youth, and I really hope that pans out. I think that you've probably taken the best route you can to being a kick butt athlete with mastering recovery.
Absolutely. And there's always something more to do. There's always better. But as of right now, I have found that thing that works for me. That thing that uh for somebody's ice bath, to me, is dry needling. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I like ice baths too. I love the way I feel after. Whenever I feel, and I know what to look for now though. At first it was kind of just like, okay, it hurts right here. But now I know to look for movement patterns, movement pattern deficits. Those things really, really, really matter. Whether it's a strength issue, whether it's a joint ligamentous issue, a tendon issue, whatever it is, though it all creates some type of pattern that you really have to look into. And it takes a trained eye sometimes. Sometimes it just can't be your coach that knows weightlifting very well.
yeah,
Because you have to break down the movements to really see what's going on. And it could be completely unrelated to weightlifting. It could be completely unrelated to your sport in general. So that's what I've begun doing now is training more so, not like a not like an athlete, but as an athletic trainer, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're becoming your own high performance team.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which that's the dream. That's the dream. Gosh, I'm blanking on his name. Something Gray is the guy who
Great
invented
cook.
that. Gray Cook. He
Yeah.
had, yeah, good looking out. He's got a saying. It says first move well and then move often.
Mm-hmm.
And I I often think about that and how that thing that was kind of stiff on my shoulder for a while. I just kept training. I didn't take a day off. I didn't take 20 minutes to loosen my shoulder up. I just
Mm-hmm.
kept training, and now I have to take a week off
Yeah.
instead of a 30-minute investment. So, um,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine if he was here, he would agree with you as well. But
Yeah,
uh,
it's always the same thing. Train smart and not strong. Be smart, not strong.
yeah,
The strength will come no matter what, but the
yeah,
being smart, you can either make a mistake now or forever avoid that, whatever that is.
yeah. It's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Hmm.
Is another one. Um, Moving more into so along the lines of something I've actually heard you talk about a little bit before, which I was really pleased to kind of hear you talk about this a little bit. Um, how do athletes identify pain versus an injury, and at what point should they either seek help or consider taking a break?
So That's a very great question. The way I approach it is so much different than when I was an athlete, which is so funny. So when I was an athlete, I just saw pain, and that's just it. This hurts. Fix it. And it's usually the area that that you're having pain that you're trying to fix, if that makes sense, and not the root cause.
Yes.
So when I see athletes, that's it. I treat pain so much differently than, I won't say a lot of clinicians, because I don't know what a lot of clinicians are necessarily doing in their practice. But for what's common, that's not how I treat pain anymore. There's this thing called the biopsychosocial model of treating pain. That is, yes, there's probably something wrong physically. And then there's a psychological effect that happens that also affects this pain. And then there's a social component that's also affecting this pain. So my time at Lindenwood, I did kind of like a small little study just to observe almost. And I noticed that when athletes complained of pain, there was the physical component, there was the stressed component, that was the physical pain was causing them some type of psychological stress. But then there was also this social thing where, if I'm able to do XYZ, if I'm able to hang out with my buddies, if I'm able to do these things that are important to me socially, if I'm able to walk upstairs to go to class, which is a social thing, but it's also a physical thing, my pain is great. Whether or not the actual injury itself has been resolved. So there's those three components that are, you can't treat one without looking at the others, or without considering the others. At least for me, that's my route. Now, is that going to be analyzed by athletes? Absolutely not. So it's up to you to kind of see what's defined as pain for these athletes. What do you define as an 8 out of 10? Well, that's, to me, is I can't sleep. Well, an 8 out of 10 for the next person is, it hurts so bad I have to go to the hospital. An 8 out of 10 for me is, it just always hurts. Whether or not it's a severe pain or a mild pain, it just always hurts. So you have to get to the bottom of what is that pain first before you even begin treating. Because otherwise it's like, you're just doing it to make them feel better, but they've defined it as XYZ. So they've literally categorized it as these things. This is what pain is for me versus ouch. You know, it's completely different for every person, but it's very, when you look at it, it's so telling. It's so telling, and it changes what even pain is for a lot of people. You just look at it completely different. You treat it different, and the resolution is completely different.
Yeah. I have I've done a couple of studies on that as well. A losing season for a team, everybody's hurt.
Yep.
And when you're winning and you're unstoppable, they're fine.
It's
But
minimized.
yeah,
Exactly.
so I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and that's something that I jotted that down, and that's something I want to look into more because that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a whole bunch of sense. It's that, and it explains, like, I say that losing season versus winning season jokingly, but I'm also completely serious. Is that
Mm-hmm.
when you just can't catch a break, and maybe the last couple games the other team beat you in like the final seconds,
Yeah.
and you can't explain why things are going wrong, the injury rates, or the reported injury rates, spike. And when you're winning and things are going good, people they find a way to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then I'll comment on that for myself as well, is that sometimes I might have like pain or an injury, and I've taken to the point that I'm getting it looked at, whether it's like an MRI or an X-ray, and it gets to the point that the doctor can kind of tell me like, it's not this bad thing that it could have been. It's this smaller, less stressful thing, less long
Mhm.
term. And I'm almost instantly like,
Yeah.
I feel 30% better just having somebody
Yeah.
tell me. And nobody really, I'm not milking it for somebody else. This is just my own my own little lifting that I'm going about doing. And
Mhm.
but sometimes just that psychological thing, I'm guilty of it as well. So
Yeah.
um it all makes
It's
sense
a
now. It all makes sense.
it's a real thing. It's also important to look into the fact that when some people are in pain and they've been in pain for a long time, chronic injuries, and they've been in pain for a long time, all they know is the pain that they feel. All they know is this is what it's going to be like. I'm always in pain. So whenever there is an outlet to get them out of pain, or you've been trying for a while, it's so important to look at, can you even see yourself without pain? Because
Yeah.
typically they're looking for it. Whenever I was rehabbing this shoulder, I was looking for that pain always. No matter
Yeah.
if it was a 10 out of 10, 4 out of 10, 2 out of 10, I was looking for it. So of course there was pain.
Yeah.
You know, it's important to look into giving the athlete the opportunity of a long-term time where they, one, can see themselves without pain. So sometimes that's a psychological thing, a sports psychologist, or even lowering an intensity of whatever they're doing so that they can have something pain free for a long period of time. So that idea of whatever they're experiencing is less and less and less. And then you can ramp up the intensity again, the volume again, make it
Yeah.
more sport specific again,
Yeah.
so that they're not always looking for it. Because that's that psychological component. It can be a vice versa thing. The pain can cause, some type of stress, or the stress can cause some type of pain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's you just said something there that was I had like six different like I don't know what to comment on first, so I'll try not to ramble too much. Um you're talking about like they can't even see themselves without pain. Like you could copy and paste that and talk about people's like emotions as well as um like they are their disordered eating or they are their depressed like it's all that they identified they're not a person who has gets anxious sometimes. As they say, I have anxiety, I am an anxious person. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could almost just like, I imagine there's an app that says I have a bad knee. Or
Yeah.
we've all probably heard our uncles and grandpas and dads say I got bad knees now. It's like, well, do you? Or have you just been saying that for like 30 years because your grandpa used to say that and like
Mm-hmm.
so that's interesting is that yeah, people definitely identify with their pain. And then there's also a thing they say that in stressful times your frontal lobe will shrink and get less blood flow, and your amygdala will enlarge and get more blood flow. And your amygdala is like your stress radar, and it's always looking for problems. And your frontal lobe is like your problem solving center. So in
Mm-hmm.
stressful times, you actually get worse at problem solving, but better at sensing stress and problems. So
Exactly.
if so if somebody's living in that status, yeah, that totally when you're talking about always thinking about and finding that shoulder pain,
Mm-hmm.
I think that just really aligns with like when we're looking for problems, you can always find something.
Exactly. It makes you more sensitive to the pain, whether or not it's mild or severe. You know, and you hit it right on the head with that. You you become so good at sensing pain. You become so good at with whether you want to or not. It's just your body's reaction to it. If I get chased by a bear every day of my life, this is a very gross uh, metaphor. But if I know every time I go home from school, I'm gonna get chased by this one bear. I know day one is gonna be a shocker versus day 30. I'm used to this by now. My body's used to it by now. These are things that I don't have to really think about anymore. You know, so with pain, that first time, it's something that you're really thinking about. You're trying to process it versus day 30, and you're still in pain. you're month 4, you're still in pain, and you've just learned how to deal with it in a different way. And it's not always a great way. In our case, we just learn how to sense it better,
Yeah.
you know? And so we always know when it's gonna happen, how it's gonna feel, how bad it's gonna be, all those things, because we become more sensitive.
Yeah. Actually, yesterday I had an athlete in tears because her back was hurting, and it wasn't the pain. She wasn't in pain at that moment. It's just been that she's young and it's her first time dealing with like a injury that's stopping her or holding her back. Um, and she's in tears because she's so frustrated. And I was just telling her, I was like, you know what? That low back is really tricky. And I was telling her one time I went over to the library and I got like a dozen books on low back pain, and I'm going through them thinking I'm gonna learn more about the anatomy and maybe some different ways to um, maybe other people. I don't diagnose things, but maybe other people diagnose things. I said, out of like those 12 books I got, like 2 of them were about physical structures, and the other 10 were on psychological. It's talking about living with pain and living in pain and all these other things. And yeah, it's complex. It's
Yeah.
it's complex. Having talked about those things and how the mind and the body interact, um, how is that mind taking what role is the mind and the brain and the thought process involved in maybe like injury recovery or healing, and then once we're healed and we're back, maybe even competing again?
Yeah. So I'll go back to what year it was, like 2017. There was a very intense camp that we were part of, or it might even be before that. So it was so painful for me. I've always had some type of shoulder issue. It was so painful for me that the only thing that really worked at that time was just thinking about a way out. Like whether that's not doing a third session, not training, whatever it was. That was my easy way out until it got to the point where I practiced positive thinking, positive seeing it first. And this is what I preach to my athletes now. Can you see it? I don't know if you remember Paul Wright. He was
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah, big time.
when he said this, and it was a part of something that he was doing in his class. When he said this, it kind of confirmed it, and it felt great because it was something that I was practicing for about 4 years before that and didn't know really what it was. So and what it was for me was for me, a weightlifter, my most painful lift was clean and jerk because it's heavy and my shoulders would just get so exhausted. So when I'm on my last few reps and whatever, and I just have to get through, the one thing that I'm doing is seeing it done perfectly. Before I even step on the platform, before I'm performing it, seeing it done perfectly. I was always better at cleaning, so I knew that part would, be over soon. But when it comes to that jerk, that's where the pain is going to be. So can I even imagine it pain free? And I'm going to imagine it pain free because that's the only way I'm going to get through this. So there's that, and then there's the competing and doing it again. So my twin, he's gonna hate me for including him in this, but he dislocated his elbow back in like 2015, 2016. That was the most painful thing to see for me, and I'm sure it was the most painful thing to experience for himself. Until he came back, I always asked him, "Hey, is there still like a small bug in the back of your head that thinks about that pain or dislocating again?" And whenever he would say, his answer would always be the same for a stretch of time. I still worry about it, but it's not painful to think about anymore. And I would notice a pattern in his training. I would notice a level of being of just holding back. He was being very conservative with his effort at heavier weights. So, and at that time, if you think about it again, he would say, it's something that I worry about, but it doesn't inhibit me from training necessarily. Until he got to the point where he stopped hearing that voice or that bug disappeared, I noticed his training got better. His competing was flawless again. And I'll always say this: my twin is my favorite lifter because I know what his preparation looks like. I know what the effort looks like. I know what that looks like, and I know the things that he can do on the competition stage. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it because the way that he's able to compartmentalize is is incredible. And when I say compartmentalize, I mean when he's on the stage, everything that's not a perfect lift goes away.
Yeah.
Goes away completely. And that's when you're able to do something without pain. And that's when that next day you don't have pain. That next week you don't have pain because how much of it was actually physical pain in the first place? You know, you have to be able to see it done in order to do it the way that's ideal. And I'm a firm believer in that at this point. With my shoulders, again, there's not a day that I go that I'm not imagining it first. I just have to. I have to. There are days that it's completely pain free. I don't want to make it seem like I'm just broken, but you know.
Yeah. And you're saying imagining it first, as in imagining a pain-free good lift?
hmm
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So you went from forecasting pain and predicting issues, and
hmm
now you've trained your mind to create the vision of success and
Exactly.
low pain. So, and I hope people caught that, because I'm a big believer in like training your mind and creating like thought trees or thought processes where you used to think negative, and that's what you got. And then I mean, you didn't fix your body first, you fixed your mind first, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm a big believer in that. So that is some that's a great story.
Yeah.
Dislocated elbow. That doesn't sound like a
Man,
whole lot of fun.
exactly. And it was quite a process for the both of us because with him being so close to me, it was kind of like I don't want that to happen to me. I couldn't ever imagine it happened to either of us. And so it impacted me as well. I had to overcome something. It was probably a little bit easier for me to overcome
Yeah.
that, but I had to overcome that vision.
Yeah.
hmm
I- that's um, very interesting.
Yeah.
You're talking about you're in that training camp and you're trying to find a way out. You're toying around with this excuse or that excuse or whatever it is. Um, and that just made me think of like the saying, like, necessity is the mother of invention. It was like, if you did not become a positive thinker, it was over. And
Yes.
it'd be really easy at that point to hang it up and to say, I used to be a good lifter. I used to do weightlifting.
Yeah.
But I picked up these shoulders, they don't work anymore, all that
hmm
stuff. And then I've got just a quick note on Paul Wright. Dr. Paul Wright is a sports psychologist, educator, and my brand that I'm working with here is the winning wellness. And I've just got, this is actually a green wall. It's not a green screen behind me.
Oh, cool.
But I use two colors in my brand, is orange and green. I use green for growth. I think about like just success and thriving and things like that. More not so much like money, but like biological, like and then orange is because of Paul Wright. Because one time he came in and handed out index cards, and he told us to write down our goals on our index cards and to keep it where we could see it. And the index card I got was orange. And I actually grew to like that color orange. I started thinking like, not that many things are orange. So
It's true.
now when I just ran into a little bit of a technical issue here, just for a few seconds, lost some footage. But yes, I do use orange as a symbol or reminder for me to think about what goals I've set and what goals I'm trying to achieve. And as I kind of wrap up that piece, I then ask
Darren if he has a list of
The
do's,
first
some
the first
do's
is
and do nots
definitely
for
do not chase pain.
other athletic trainers or strength coaches
Do
or just
not
anybody that's working
chase
with
pain.
athletes. And that's where
And
we
I'll say
pick
it a
back
third
up.
time. Do not chase pain. Why? Because it's seldom the cause. Again, we look at movement now. We look at movement patterns now. While there may be a biceps issue, we have to look at a more cohesive movement in the glenohumeral joint, what the scapula is doing, and where there might be movement deficits other places in the body. So for example, there was a guy that completely he stopped lifting because he had shoulder issues. Now, he had great shoulder mobility. However, everywhere else in his body was not so great. His hips were not great, his ankles were not great. And he just didn't move well enough to perform my favorite lift, the snatch, because everything's involved. So it was a really easy fix. However, it was not a short fix. It takes time. It definitely takes time. And I want all athletic trainers to see it as that. You'll find a thing that helps, but always do a test and a retest so that you can know if you're on the right track or if you're not. There's no reason to perform one treatment or two treatments if they're not working. So test and retest is gold. And do not chase pain. Now, the other do's is obviously finding the core of whatever it is that you're doing. If you're gonna, and I'm always gonna say dry needling because it's my favorite. If you're gonna do dry needling, make sure it's the best for the situation, or make sure it's the better of the situations, and know your rationale. Uh, it's it's almost kind of like a curse that when there's a new graduate or a shy graduate that begins treating, you are a clinician, so it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn from those mistakes. What it's not okay to do is treat and then use an arbitrary reason for whatever you're doing. Well, when I was in college, this is what they said, or this book says XYZ. Yes, use that as a reference, even when you're doing research. And I love doing research at this point, but it's a reference, it's a guide to your practice. That is one of the biggest do's out there, is using everything as a reference and then refining your practice with patient care. And that's gonna create the questions that we have, as practitioners. You're always gonna have some type of curiosity. That's gonna create that. Once you say, well, this matched perfectly with this study, or this was the complete opposite of this study, so why? You begin to think critically and analyze. And that's the magic in research. And that's the magic that athletic training has growing, I'll say. Mm-hmm.
Start getting that mastery and understand the why behind everything.
Exactly.
Talk about relationship development, because I know that I've seen you in action. I know I've seen athletes, they know who they want to go see when they go in the athletic training room. They want to go. They wanted Darren to be there, to come be there to care for them and things like that. So I'm betting a part of that is your intelligence. Part of that is your success rate, but also your personality and how you're developing a relationship. So can you talk about that a little bit?
It's all about being approachable. I always had the factor that I was an athlete that made other athletes trust me, but there are other athletes slash athletic trainers out there that aren't as approachable. It's just like choosing a doctor. Do I want the doctor that I'm going to be shy to tell the most personal things to? Or do I want the one that's I'm going to be able to open up to about anything and everything, whether it's a personal life or just completely athletic or academic world? Whatever it is, you have to be approachable, or at least look approachable. whatever that may be for the next person, you have to be able to open that door and not close the second one. So if you're going to be the one asking all the questions or saying everything as a clinician, as a practitioner, that closes the door for the athlete to ask you questions, ask you about your philosophy, to pick your brain, or to just develop that trust. They're not always going to know what it is, the reason you chose to do whatever, or they're not always going to know the whys or the whats. What they're going to know is, how is this going to help me? How are you going to help me? And how long are you going to be here? That's a big one. I'm sorry to all of my athletes in the past, but I'm never the one that's going to be here long. I'm here for a learning opportunity and hopefully a long time. But yeah, like, unfortunately, that's just my career these days.
Yeah.
But to create that buy-in, I'm definitely always looking to find my own personal relationship with each person. On the rugby team, it was hard because there were so many of them, but it was easy because we all shared one thing in common. We loved learning about each other's culture. There was a bunch of South Africans on the team. There was a load of people from the UK, Hispanics. Everyone wanted to learn about each other, and that was just like, all right, that's where I'm going to take it. We're going to learn as much about each other personally, so that it just creates a bond. It creates a bond that you can teach me when they're in a position where they can teach you something, whether or not that's academic related, whether or not it adds to you academically at all. It opens that door to trust. And that's gold. That's gold for any type of treatment, because when you start treating, you have purpose. You have purpose before you touch them. You have purpose before you create a program. You have purpose before anything. And that's where it's going to really, really matter. They're going to know that you have their best interests in mind. They're going to know that you're on the same page no matter what. They're going to know that they can always say, hey, this isn't working for me. For the average athlete who just goes through something and they can't tell their athletic trainer or their PT or their doctor, I don't like this that much. Those are the ones that it lingers. Whatever treatment you're doing, it lingers without ideal results. So creating that trust and finding your own personal buy-in is the way to go.
Yeah, I was able to observe that firsthand with you. For the time that was too short over here at Linwood, you know, you sold athletes on yourself. They wanted your help.
Yeah.
And that's just from a guy who was walking in and out of the AT room, where I'd hear, have conversations with people over in the weight room and things like that. Moving forward, what's going to happen in the future here? What's going to happen with athletic training, and what's going to happen with you? What are some predictions made for the industry and for your own career? We've already kind of brushed on the dry needling. We're all going to stay tuned, keep our eyes open.
I will say my long-term goal for athletic training, my personal long-term goal, is to create something that includes all of the advanced skills that we need that aren't always legal in every state. So with rugby, for example, nationally, we are allowed to do reduction. If somebody dislocates XYZ within reason, can we reduce it? Nationally, we have the permission to do so. State by state, there's always some type of legal issue that prevents us from performing advanced skills.
So is reduction putting a joint back in place?
Yes.
Okay, I see.
So at Lindenwood, this was kind of something that we were getting into. Unfortunately, my time there was a little limited, but with Dr. Matava, this was something that I presented to him to say, hey, these numbers are increasing quickly. Can we get some type of training to do XYZ, or some type of knowledge to do reductions? And in some states, all you have to do is get the training and the sign off by your covering physician. That's not always the case with everywhere, but in Missouri, we're one of the states. I'm not in Missouri anymore. So so that's something that I was getting into. More other specific things are, IV training, phlebotomy. I'm a phlebotomist as well, because that's something that I saw when I was a student, when we had 2 football players come in with rhabdomyolysis. The recommendation for that is early IV. And when you have 0 people in the athletic training room who can do IV and or know how to have the education to do so, we have to do the exact same thing we always do: call 911, call the ambulance. So my goal for athletic training personally is to cut the middleman. It's not always necessary. There's a community of, people out there that need the ambulance probably more than we do. If we have the training to do these things, there's no need to go to the urgent care. There's no need to go to the emergency room. There's no need to call the physician when we have the training and the skills to do all these things. Again, that's going to take a lot of collaboration, a lot of effort, and a lot of evidence to say it's necessary. It's already been said a couple times in some statements, but will you have the entire world of athletic training agree to say this is where athletic training is going? That's the hard part. If everyone's going to agree with the path of athletic training. And now that we're talking about the path of athletic training, the path is just general advancement, general living in the new definition of what the athletic training is. So in the 80s, well before what we know as athletic training now, it was more of a PE. It was more of a strength. Everything's about strength. Everything's about the big one is liability. We're not that anymore. Yes, we are. We prevent things from happening, ergo helping with liability, helping with these insurance claims, helping with all these things that these institutions worry about. But we also are this big thing: prevention. We are prevention healthcare. We are rehabilitative healthcare. We are post practice, post competition, all these things compiled in one. And we have to have a greater understanding of other disciplines: psychology, chiropractic, ortho, PT, performance. You guys, we have to have a deeper understanding of all these things to become greater. And again, that word is advancement. We are no longer just liability. We are no longer just put some tape on it. That ended a long time ago. So the name of athletic training has changed. The meaning of athletic training has changed. Now the practice has to change as well. And that's where I see the field going. It might take a couple teeth to pull out, and some protests here and there. I mean that very lightly, but that's what it's gonna feel like, to get the older population, or the comfortable population, I should say, not necessarily older, the comfortable population athletic training, to see where the difference is and how to get there.
Yeah. And that all makes sense to me as a
yeah. And me personally, I just want to create that framework.
Yeah.
Whether that's going to be another doctorate program, hint, hint, or a master's program, hint, hint, or some type of education outlet.
Yeah.
That's where I want to go personally. Hint, hint.
Yeah. So you are an athletic trainer. You have insight and advice for athletic trainers. As a strength coach, I can piggyback off of some of these ideas. I'm probably not going to become a phlebotomist, but if no one else,
you really could.
If no one else will,
Exactly.
I'm happy to save a life or save an athletic career, anyways. Have you seen anything in your time that sits a little bit more in the strength coach's realm, as far as like you're always seeing like tweaked backs or things that are happening in the weight room. It gets kind of a little murky because you're a weightlifter and you work with a barbell, and then your athletes were not weightlifters, but they worked with barbells in the weight room for a few hours a week. So it gets a little murky, but anything that maybe you would suggest for reducing injuries or speeding up the rehab protocol?
Yeah, and I can actually speak very personally on this because I was at Lindenwood, so I know where the holes are, but I imagine this is everywhere. The one thing that I wanted the most at Lindenwood was a more cohesive performance and athletic training program, because we all make up sports medicine. There, you don't have one without the other. When we get someone to their higher level, they're still working with us, but they're not with you guys. They're doing both. So closing that gap in communication, closing that gap in practices, and making it less of a prideful thing, like we're over here, we do this, and we're over here, we do this. Not saying that that's necessarily what happened at Lindenwood, but I know it to be an issue across many institutions where the PT does this, where the performance does this, and athletic training does this, and doctors do this, and things like that. To once we close that gap, especially in performance and athletic training, it's golden, because there's knowledge that you guys have that we don't always use. We don't use those skills, and vice versa. So when we teach each other, it becomes this. It becomes harmony for us because we're helping each other. We're growing together, and then also we have this athlete that should have been back in 4 months is now back in 2. Or should have been back in a delayed time. So that's where I would say it's just closing that gap.
Nice. Yeah, that is it's neat when that relationship goes well, and that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's a jerk or lazy. It just might mean that schedules don't line up. It could be those things, but it could also be that schedules don't line up, or that communications have gotten lost in the mail or whatever. But when you can, as more of a strength person, personality that is, when I can collaborate and cooperate with my ATs and be on the same page, and we can maybe I hear more about some of the little tweaks and injuries, and I learn like, oh, I'm not doing enough of X or Y or Z, and I can just put that in the program like that day and start making improvements. Or if I hear that Sally or Johnny is having this problem, and maybe I can do that different, or I can say now that I'm kind of becoming one of the older guys, I might say like, hey, I can't really tell you why this worked for athletic trainers, but we had an athletic trainer that used to do this, or I saw this at this place. And I might be talking to somebody who is certified and educated, but has been in the professional field for 6 months or something. And so I might just have seen things that they haven't. So to be able to communicate with them, it makes a difference. Those athletes benefit greatly, and that's kind of the whole point.
Exactly. I would say, and you just made me think about this, is something specific is and I'm not sure at this point, it's been a while. Something that I wanted at Lindenwood was for our strength coaches to be very familiar with the same protocols that we were using post-op, our ACL guys, because we literally get paper that says week by week what they're doing. And I don't know if you guys get that either. Yeah, so that's a gap there, and we tried to do this. We tried to close that gap a little bit, but unfortunately, it was a little bit unsuccessful at that time. But the same protocol that we get post-op, I feel like you guys should get, because it helps to keep everybody on the same page as far as the healing process, or at least the demands from the surgeon or whoever it is. And then also what the athlete is able to do. If we're on week 4 and they're performing at week 6, things like that. If they have the movement and the strength, and they're moving so well, and we don't have to we don't have to go slow. Everybody's involved. You guys are involved. We're involved. So why not give you this protocol to say, hey, this is what we're doing. So just because we can't always go over there and say we're gonna put them through XYZ. That's you guys do that as well. getting them back to a functional movement or even a more athletic, competition ready movement. We're all together in that. So, and that's, I would say specifically, that's something that I really wanted at that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah. And that stands true to this day. So we're working on it. It's it's a work in progress, without pointing any fingers. It's a work in progress. So hey, this has all been some really fantastic information. You've had a great career, not only as a practitioner, but as an athlete. So my final question, I usually forget something else and ask something else at the last second, but a question I try to make my final question is that I talk about winning wellness. And my thought process with that name is that those who are not well, whether it's a dislocated elbow, mental health, heart disease, whatever it is, some people, they're not in the position to compete or chase their goals. They actually just need to chase like a state of wellness. They have to they have to improve whatever that top marker is for them, and that's their focus for them. And then the winning wellness for other people, they are fit, they are ready to compete, and we want to help them promote them to be successful. So you can look at it in two different ways. When you hear about winning wellness, what comes to your mind as far as the thing that people are not doing or need to be doing? This can be athletes, general population, or maybe you told us all this stuff already, and
It's
that's
the
fine
smaller
too.
things. It's the small things, because so there's the winning part, and you are saying winning, right?
Yep.
So there's the winning part. When I think about that initially, I think about the finish line and not necessarily the journey to get there. And when I think about wellness, I think about the most optimal version of myself, which those things are great, but it's the journey to get to there. It's the figuring out what can be better, what we can just leave behind, and what the problems are in the first place. If the one thing that's holding me back is my mental, is my ability to cope, and it has nothing to do with my athletic career, I want to identify that so that one, I can win, and then two, so that I can be well. And it's so easy to just jump to the end and say, well, I want these things. Does it take me one day to win a gold medal at Pan Am's? Does it take one day to just skip to the end and say I was this, or I won this? It's the journey. It's figuring out, and it's always going to be an up and down. It's not just gonna. That's an ideal world, and hopefully that's somebody's reality. But we have to be prepared for the ups and downs. So defining what winning looks like, definitely. Whether that's this week, I had 3 great days. The others could be better. That's winning. This week I had somebody could be it could be 2 days. That's their winning. So enjoying the journey all the way up until things are perceived to be your perfect reality. So that winning, and then when it becomes well, I think that they really go hand in hand. When you conquer these things, like if like I said, if coping was an issue, when you conquer that, not only that's winning, but you're also well in that fashion. Now let's attack these other things that are keeping you from being well, or at least not the most ideal, the most optimistic version of wellness. So in a nutshell, enjoy the journey to becoming those two things, a winner and well. That the journey is king. The journey is king.
Dr. Darren, that was a fantastic answer. No one will ever hear it because I'm gonna edit that out and just steal that script, and I'm gonna make it a motivational like clip of me just saying exactly what you just said. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Um, And thank you for all of your time today. If listeners are interested, if they want to reach out to you, is that an option? If so, how so?
Absolutely. So there's always the option of my Instagram, which the name is a little different now. It's actually Churrito 56 kg, like the food, churro, but Churrito 56 kg. I'll just pop up on there. There's not too many people with that name. You can find me on Facebook, Darren Barnes. So I prefer Instagram, but Facebook completely fine. My email, of course, darrenbarnes62 at Gmail. 62 is not indicative of anything. but but either way, any platform, find me at, you can literally type in my name, find me on most platforms. So yeah, any questions, anything, I'm always willing to hear and be of some type of service.
Awesome. Darren, you're the man. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for listening to our Winning Wellness podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions for podcast guests or topics, you can submit those through YouTube comments. You can message me on Instagram. My handle is Mitch Schwartzman, or you can email me at coachmitchschwartzman@gmail.com.